Have you ever heard about the square of development? Probably not. It is one of Schulz von Thune's lesser known models, and it is probably entirely unknown in the English-speaking world. However, it is quite a useful and interesting tool, and we will take a look at it today. Welcome to the Soft Skill channel. My name is Sebastian Jung, and today we'll take a look at the square of development. The square was originally developed as the square of values by German philosopher Nikolai Hartmann, and it was later introduced to psychology by his student Paul Hellwig. Schulz von Thun developed it further and turned it into a square of development. So how does it work? We'll take a look at that. We start with a value, with a desirable habit or personality trait. We use frugality. This is quite a popular virtue in Germany. Now, the first concept, the first basic aspect of the square is that this value, frugality, cannot stand on its own. It needs a counterpart. It needs a sister value that is also positive but opposed to frugality. So this would be generosity. Now there's always a tension between these two values. And the ideal situation is that you are able to use both of them. That you can move freely in this area between them, and that you can be more frugal if the situation calls for it, and more generous if the situation calls for that. You could imagine it as a kind of scale that might lean one way for a while, and then and then the other way for a while, but that always maintains a kind of balance. Now, if this scale breaks and tilts entirely into one direction, let's say we overdo the frugality and we totally stop being generous. We totally object to generosity. We just want frugality, nothing else. What will happen then is that this virtue, this value, turns into a devaluated over-exaggeration. Though in this case, this would be miserliness. And the same thing can happen on the other side. If you overdo the generosity, it will turn into squandering. And this is another basic aspect of the square, that you understand a negative personality trait, a negative habit, as the over-exaggeration of a positive value. Now, let's say we've noticed that we tend to be a miser and we want to change that. We want to outgrow this bad habit. What should we do? First of all, there is a risk here. we might overcompensate, we might switch from miserliness into the other extreme, into squandering, which of course would be undesirable because we would still be in this lower row of exaggeration. So rather what we would like to do is to learn generosity again, to move from miserliness to generosity, so we get back into the upper row and we get back into this area between the sister values. So we are currently a miser, we want to develop generosity, we want to maintain frugality, we don't want to lose that, because if we lose that, if we overdo the development, we will have this overcompensation again, we will move into squandering, so squandering is what we would like to avoid. So I guess you understand where this is going. The square of development helps us to visualize and to understand the situation we are currently in, and to understand where we want to go and the context, what we need to take care of. And you can use the square pretty freely in this way. It can also be, you can use it for yourself, you can also use it to help others. Then it would be a kind of a coaching square, and you can construct it freely. You start at any of the four edges. Let's say you've noticed you tend to be a bit lazy lately and you want to do something about that. So we start with laziness and then we fill in the other corners in any order that comes easy for us. Maybe it's easiest for you to figure out the opposite of laziness. Let's say for you it would be a workaholic mindset, where people only see their work and nothing else, and they work till they get a burnout. So this would be the extreme example. And now that you have those two, maybe it's easier to figure out what the upper row, what the values are. In this case, laziness would probably be the exaggeration of self-care, and the workaholic mindset would be the exaggeration of motivation. So your square would look like this, and your direction of development would be from laziness to motivation, maintaining self-care, avoiding a workaholic mindset. Now, of course, the square could look different for you. Maybe let's start with laziness again. Maybe for you, laziness is the exaggeration of relaxation. Oops. And the opposites to those two would be busyness and a hectic rush. So again, your direction of development would be from laziness to busyness, maintaining relaxation, avoiding the hectic rush. As I said, you can fill in the four squares in any order. If you have an idea what should be in a square, so how you would describe a square, but you don't find the right word. You can also write a short description. You can draw a small image. You can make up a new word, whatever you like. There is no right or wrong here. Of course, the square should make sense in itself and it should make sense to you. But apart from that, you are free to do as you please and create the square in any way that is helpful to you. There are a couple of different ways you can apply the square, different uses for it. We've already talked about the coaching square, where it helps you figure out where am I and where do I want to go. You can take this one step further and apply the square to the deeper basic questions of life. Schulz von Thun calls this, literally translated, the philosophical square of balance. However, I would prefer to translate it as the reflection square. One value that is pretty popular and highly appreciated in the Western Europe and North American societies is self-efficacy. The belief that you are in control of your life, that you develop your life. This is also the from rags to riches idea, that you can achieve anything if you really want it, if you set your mind to it, and if you work hard for it. Now, this is quite a popular value, and it is also an important value, but it still needs a counterpart, it still needs a sister value, such as humility and serenity, because there are a lot of things in our lives that we have no control over, such as our birth and our death, and a lot of things in between. And if we overdo this self-efficacy, it might turn into delusions of omnipotence, and it can lead to a lot of problems. For example, if you believe that you are in control and that everything is according to how hard you work and how strongly you want things to happen, then if you fail, you might put a lot of blame on yourself. I didn't want it enough. I didn't try hard enough. I didn't work hard enough, even if the circumstances are actually to blame. And of course, humility and serenity can also move in quite troublesome directions if they are exaggerated. They might turn into resignation, where you feel like it's not even worth trying because you can't do anything anyway. This is what the square would look like, and as I said, it can be helpful to ponder about this deeper basic questions of life. But there are also more immediate practical applications. For example, you can use the square to give feedback, especially if you need to give critical, negative feedback, which is always difficult to do. It can be quite helpful. Let's say you are a teacher and you're having trouble due to the insubordination of one of your students, and you want to talk to him about it. If you use the square of development to visualize the situation, if you use it as a feedback square, it can help you understand that this insubordination, that there are also positive traits and positive aspects behind that. such as self-confidence and a strong own will, and you don't want this student to overcompensate and to turn into a submissive model student who doesn't have any will of its own. You just want him to show some obedience where the situation calls for it. And this is what the square would look like. And to visualize it in this way and to get this understanding of the situation can help you to go into this conversation. And if you convey this understanding to your student, it might also be accepted more easily than if you just say, I don't like your behavior, please do it like that from now on. And the square can also be useful in other difficult conversations to visualize the challenge as a challenge square. Schulz von Thun gives the example of a father who has to talk to his son because the son stole something. Now, the challenge is that the father wants to clearly confront this misbehavior. However, he doesn't want to overdo it, because if he overdoes it, he might criminalize his son and contribute to a negative self-image where his son views himself as a criminal. So he always needs to maintain a certain respect of the dignity of his son, of the culprit. However, he shouldn't overdo that either, because that might lead to trivializing the matter, to just saying, oh, it was nothing, let's just forget about this. And he doesn't want that either. So this is what the square would look like. And again, visualizing it in this way can help the father understand the challenge in the conversation ahead and what are the risks that he needs to be aware of and that he needs to avoid. The square can also help to clear up conflicts as a polarization square. Here Schulz von Thun gives the example of a family, husband, wife and children. And the children are watching TV and they have just used up their allotted TV time for the day. However, they are saying, oh, the show is so exciting and it is finished in just a few minutes. Please let us watch the rest. Now, the father is in favor of consistency. He would prefer to say, no, you have used your time, TV is turned off right now. The wife, however, is in favor of flexibility. She would rather say, it's all right, you can watch a few more minutes and finish the show, it's fine. Now, since they have opposing views, there will probably be some struggle between the husband and the wife. And what will happen then is that they both view themselves in the upper row of the square of development, where the values are, and they view their partner in the lower row, where the exaggeration is. It would look like this. The father views himself as a champion of consistency, but the wife is overly soft and inconsequential. The wife, on the other hand, says, I am a champion of flexibility, but you are pedantic. Understanding this mechanism is a first step to resolving the conflict. And furthermore, it is important to understand that those values they each favor, consistency and flexibility, that they aren't either or opposites, where you have to choose one over the other, but that they are both important and that you always need both, and that you need to find a balance between them that fits the current situation. And this is the same not only for individual people, but also for entire cultures. Here the square can be used as a culture square. Schulz von Thun gives the example that in the Western societies, individuality is valued very highly. In other cultures, community is favored more strongly. For Western society, self-fulfillment is quite important. In some other societies, it's more important to be loyal to your family and support your family or support your community. So, as in that struggle between wife and husband, each party views itself in the value row, and they view the other party in the exaggeration row. Have a look. The people who favor individuality say, oh, we are champions of individuality, which is good, but you are in favor of totalitarian collectivism. We don't want that. While the people who are in favor of a community say, oh, we are champions of community, which is a great value, but what you do is just ruthless, egocentric behavior, and we don't want that. And again, it's important to understand that both values are needed and are important, and it's not a choice, either the one or the other, but you need to combine both and find a balance between both. Personally, I like the square of development a lot. It is one of my favorite models because it is so simple yet quite helpful. It is applicable to a lot of situations, and I also like the underlying ideas, the underlying concepts. I especially like that there is a strong aspect of balance here, because I believe that for a lot of soft skills, balance is quite an important aspect. And so, as I said, it is one of my favorites, and I would like to invite you to give it a try. You just need a piece of paper and a pen, and you can start creating squares of development. For starters, maybe just draw up a few squares for values that pop into your mind and try out the construction of the square, and maybe you find some that are relevant to your personal situation and that really help you visualize and understand situation you are in and show you a direction of development. Let me know in the comments about your experiences, if the square is useful for you, and let me know how you like the video. I hope you enjoyed it. In this case, I would appreciate a like. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I obviously invite you to do so. This way you won't miss any future content, such as next week's video, where we take a look at the tools of our everyday work. We will see each other then. For today, I take my leave. Have a nice day. See you next time.